glad to see everybody here. Guys, thank you so much. I know coming in is really hard, so I just really appreciate the fact that you guys get online and listen to me yammer on and on about different stuff. So it's much appreciated. All right, let's get on to this. Let's get on to this Picra real quick. So I'm going to start this off with a couple of stories. All right, so story number one: buyer request that the seller do some repairs in the crawl space.
Did you want the Pica and the Picra, or just the Picra?
I want both. I want the Pica.
Pica's first, right?
Yeah, Pica first. All right. So the seller goes out and hires the cheapest person he can find to go do a plumbing inspection on the house. And this person, somebody the seller hired, right, comes back, $10,000 of repairs required. And the deal starts going sideways, right? Because the seller's like, no, we're not doing it. And the buyer's agent's like, well, you hired him. You got to go by him. And it was an ugly mess, right? So the buyer's agent called me and Craig and says, well, what am I going to do? Well, I said, well, first things first. Who hired the plumber? Well, the seller did. Okay, this is for your buyer. Yes. Go get a plumber and do an independent verification of what's going on with that plumbing. They said, okay. They sent their plumber out there that they know, like, and trust, have a real good reputation, have a real good rapport with them. The plumber goes out there, looks at everything, and goes, there is not a damn thing wrong with the plumbing in that house. Nothing. So this is a situation where the seller, trying to hire the cheapest person he could find, was getting ripped off. And it almost blew the entire deal up, right? Because nobody's going in a crawl space. So that in and of itself, because he used the thing that, well, it's cast iron plumbing and there's a belly, but there was no problems. So my point behind that is never, ever let the seller hire someone to investigate a problem and find out what's wrong. It is your responsibility to your buyer to hire the best person to investigate and find out what's wrong. Who hires the home inspector? Buyer, right? So if the buyer hires a home inspector and the home inspector says you need to have the HVAC looked at closer, inspected, who should be hiring the inspector for the HVAC? The buyer. But too many times I see it all the time, seller to have HVAC inspected. That should be stop right there. Not the seller's job, nor do you want it to be the seller's job. But the reason you don't want it to be the seller's job is because he's going to go out and hire his third cousin's brother's by second marriage, twice divorced friend who saw an HVAC system once and happens to have a license that may or may not be still and come over, and he's going to do whatever that guy tells. Oh, yeah, it's good. That's no problem. That's not what you want, and that is not in the best interest of your buyer. Yes?
If you're on the selling side, we just proved it's not in the best interest of your seller either.
Yeah, so it's not in the best interest of the seller either. It also helps you to shift liability. Liability, if you're the listing agent, and you hire someone to do work on the house, and then you leave, and the buyer comes in. How many people have been in business more than 5 years? How many people have had the selling agent, the buyer's agent, call you after closing, a month after closing, goes, that repair that the seller did is wrong. It's happened. Well, if the buyer hired the contractor, that phone call never happens. And if it does, you go, well, take it up with your contractor because you hired him. All I did was pay him. Okay? It's a paradigm shift in how we do this. And I know I'm hammering and yammering on this, but I'm telling you, probably one of the most important things you can do for your buyer is taking control of all the inspections so that you know what's wrong because you hired somebody you know, like, and trust. Yes, Karen?
I agree with you. It needs to be a mind shift for us because we're not used to really doing it that way.
Yep.
And it's a shift in time frame because basically we put in there 5 days for a property inspection, 7 days for a property inspection. They do it all of a sudden you have a day or two to turn in that Picra and ask for repairs. Well, you don't have time for your people to go and investigate. So what is the thought process on that?
Great question. So the question was, because we're doing this mind shift, our thought process has always been, we're going to get that home inspection done in 5 days. So let's say our home inspector can't get out there for day 4, and now the Picras do, but there's other things that need to be investigated. For me, it's really simple. I submit an extension to the time frame based on the fact that we found problems that we need to further investigate, right? Most sellers are not going to have a problem with that, right? Because you did it in the time frame that you were supposed to do it in, and now you need to tell them, hey, look, we found out there's something wrong with the HVAC. We're not sure what. I've already called. I can get my guy in here in 2 days. Time runs out tomorrow. I need a 3-day extension to get him in there. It's scheduled for this date. So that's personally how I do it, is I make sure I get an extension because, and if the seller says, well, no, buy it or don't buy it. You need to be able to investigate, because if you agree to it and you go, okay, fine, caveat on poor state, that's on you, right? So then you find out later you've got this entire HVAC system that maybe needs to be replaced. That can be upwards of $10,000 to $15,000, right? So you need to make sure you take the time and do your own investigation. Yes, Karen?
What again is your
Get an extension.
wording that you put on when you do the property inspection contingency addendum? When you put it in there and you write in there, you put in there something about all contractors. You check off.
So on the Pica, we'll get to that on the Pica.
Okay.
Here, scroll down. You're talking about,
Right there.
right, other inspections.
Yes.
As deemed necessary by buyer. Any and all inspections as deemed necessary by buyer. Because when you do that, I can do it by anybody I want to. I don't have to depot. I don't have to have a home inspector. I can do it by anybody I want to. Right? That means I can get a home inspection. That means I can get a chimney inspection, a pool inspection, or whatever inspection I want. I can do a drive-by. I can do a drive-by and go, yep, one of my inspections was a drive-by. We didn't like the house. Bye, see you.
The other cool thing about checking that box and putting that wording in there, if you know there are things that you're gonna want inspected, and your home inspector can't get there to day 5, but you can get the pool inspector there, you can get all those other contractors there earlier, you might be able to get stuff done before, so wait for the home inspector to tell you it needs to be checked.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right, good. So let's go back to the top of this. So when we filling this out, right, there's a couple things to notice here. This agreement, let's go to inspection reports, okay? So really important. This agreement shall be contingent upon buyer obtaining one or more of the following inspections, with the results being acceptable to buyer in buyer's sole discretion. That is probably one of the most powerful real estate contract sentences you can say. Buyer's sole discretion. He has the discretion to go, I don't like it because you have a nail in that wall and it should have been in that wall because that nail points that way and that one points that way and it should have been over there. I don't like it. That's his sole discretion to be able to do that. That can be that picky. Or buyer reserves the right to terminate the agreement subject to the terms and conditions set forth below. Buyer shall perform A, B, C, D, and or E. A is a home inspection done by a licensed professional through DPOR. If you check that box, and only that box, you have no choice but to do a home inspection. Period. That's the way it is. EPIS. That is kind of crazy to me that we have to do that because I just think it would be part of it. But EPIS can be an invasive inspection, right? And that invasive inspection includes them. Everybody know what EPIS is? Exterior Insulation Finish System, which is stucco. It's stucco on wood instead of stucco on block. Really, if you want to just really talk about it, right? Because stucco really came about really in block-built homes down in Florida. You build a block and you do stucco on them. Just covers the block up, gives it a nice exterior finish. We do it on wood around here with chicken wire. It makes no sense to me, but okay. So in order to figure out that there's a problem, you drill holes in the stucco and test the wood behind it to see if there's moisture has gotten behind it, and the moisture gets behind the EPIS and rots out the wood. That's the problem with the EPA system. So in order to do that inspection, it's an invasive inspection, and you have to have a company that's certified to come out. They do that, and then they have to go in there, and they're not cheap, right? But it's a good thing to do if you're buying EPA. So lead-based paint inspection, that's on there because that's a federal inspection. It's a federal requirement. We have a lot of stuff on there, and that's the one federal form that we have is our lead-based paint form, right? So on that lead-based paint form, and we can get into this at a later date, but if you didn't do that lead-based paint form and they find lead in the house and they get a settlement for $5,000, it's treble damages, so it's really a settlement for $15,000. So just something to keep in mind. And then the last one here, specific inspections by depot licensed contractor or tradesman. You can put in here, if you know that maybe there's an HVAC problem, you can put that in there, that's fine. But E is the one that I like. E is the one that I like because it says, such other investigations and inspections of the property, other inspections report as buyer may desire as follows. Any and all inspections as deemed necessary by buyer. Any and all inspections as deemed necessary by buyer. That gives me the leeway to drive by the house and inspect it from the road with my uncle and go, I don't like it. Okay? That's very, very important to have that in there. Does that make sense?
So you're saying do not check one A?
No, I'm saying check A and E.
A and E.
Yeah, because...
A is saying you have to do the inspection.
Right, but E is telling me I can walk away on any inspection. So I walked away on this inspection before I got to that one.
A drive-by inspection.
Yeah, drive-by
I
inspection.
like that.
Yeah.
Because I had that one where my people need to get out of a house to buy another one, and we had to do an inspection.
Yeah, well, if you had that sentence in there, you wouldn't have had to.
Marty.
I got into an agent about it. Look, no, my client drove by the house, didn't like it. Well, what do you mean? I'm like, did you read E, other inspections? Any and all inspections? That was an inspection. He inspected it from the road, didn't like it. Have a nice day. Okay. I had to deal with a broker, but that's okay. He actually said to me, who's your broker? Hello, Spider. He said, who's your broker? And I said, well, hold on, I'll get him for you. And I just laid the phone down, went and got a cup of coffee, come back, and I said, this is Kenny, I'm the broker. Oh, that agent hung up on me. Click, I was mad as hell. He was mad as hell. Yes, sorry.
I was just going to say, from a consumer perspective, from like a seller's perspective, do you have people that, when you put that in there, do you get many counters?
Pushback?
Yeah, I got pushback.
I have not gotten pushback, but if you get pushback on that, just remind them simply, hey, listen, guys, this is a caveat on poor state. Are you telling me that you don't want my buyer to do his full investigation of everything that he wants to do to maybe find out what's wrong with the house? Are you hiding something?
That's what I said.
And because if you're hiding something, we can just walk away now. But this is so if we run into anything, and here's what I say. This is mainly so that if we run into anything on the home inspection that makes us need to do other inspections, I'm not going to ask your seller to investigate something for me and make him pay for it. We're going to do that ourselves. This is what gives me the opportunity to do that. So, but I've never really had pushback on it. You probably didn't have pushback so much as, why are you doing that? What other inspections are you doing? I don't know yet. Haven't investigated a house.
It was a little bit of pushback because they hadn't seen it before because a lot of people don't use it. But his pushback was, well, it says you can do that up there. In the first one, you can have follow-on inspection. I said, yeah, but I don't want to wait for the home inspector. What if I see something I don't want to wait for the home inspector for? I can get someone scheduled sooner. That first paragraph says I have to have the home inspector tell me it needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
Or investigated. That second paragraph says I can just do it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go down just a little bit further. All right. The property inspection report, that's good. The property inspection report, EPIS inspection report, lead-based paint assessment report, specific inspection report, other inspection reports, and any supplemental reports are collectively referred to as inspection reports. Now, that just sounds like double talk, right? Let me explain why it says that. Because if you are going to submit a Picra for repairs, it's not just the home inspection you have to give them. You have to give them any inspection and all inspections and all reports that you had done if you submit a Picra. We'll get to that in a second. Buyer shall be solely responsible for the selection and payment of inspection services or inspectors for the inspections described in A, B, C, D, and E above, and will arrange for these inspections. listing firm, selling firm, and seller will assist buyer in coordinating access to the property for such inspections. That tells you right there that the buyer should be paying for, selecting, and paying for all those inspections. Whether it's HVAC, whether it's dryback, whatever it is, whether it's an additional plumbing inspection, all that. That says that's what it gives you the guidelines. Now, can you adjust that by putting in your Picra seller too? Sure you can. Should you? No. Right? It's telling us right here that really the way to do this is have the buyer do it because, again, caveat on poor state, buyer beware, buyer do their own investigation, buyer determine whether this place is good or it's not. That's what that's really all about. All right. Any questions on page 1? Go back to the very first one. This one is usually a problem when it is a vacant property or HUD property or something where the utilities are not on. So can you get the utilities turned on in the buyer's name in order to do your inspection? Answer is yes, you can. There's a little bit of hoops to jump through, but you can absolutely do it. And if the other side is just refusing to put the utilities on, like with some of these banks, and sometimes they won't even let you, I suggest you walk away. But that's, depending on the price, right? I mean, if the price is low enough, you got an ARV of $400,000, you get the house for $200,000, and who gives a shit, right? Who gives a care if anything's working? All right, going back down. All right, page 2, deadline. Contingency removal release. Delivery deadline within X number of days. Let's talk about that deadline real quick. So let's say I submit a Pica today. And today is what day? Wednesday? When is it due? Everybody, raise your hand when you think it's due.
You submit a what today?
Pica. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Pica. So you do the contract, you're ratified.
Yeah, and I said 7 days. So when is it due?
In 7 days.
Okay, what day?
Tuesday, midnight on Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Midnight.
So Wednesday would be actually the 8th day, correct?
Today? Are we starting?
No,
It would be the 7th day, yeah.
no, because the dates start at midnight
Starts
according to the
on
contract.
the next day.
Correct.
I mean,
Correct.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday,
Thursday.
Wednesday. Wednesday, you gotta have them by midnight on Wednesday.
Yes, it would start on Thursday.
Your time starts tomorrow,
At 0001.
At midnight.
Wednesday at midnight, right? Because the time doesn't start, you don't count the day it was signed. The day it was signed, the timing starts midnight.
Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Correct, Wednesday at midnight. Wednesday at midnight. But a lot of people go, oh, well, it starts today, so it's due Tuesday at midnight. No, just remember in the last paragraph of the contract, under miscellaneous, it talks about time frames, and it says anything signed like that starts midnight, the day signed, and then that's when your clock starts. So midnight tonight, so tomorrow will be day 1. Okay, and then move forward from there. Okay. It says within that time frame, the buyer will deliver to the listing firm one of 3 or 2 things. And let's just read it for what it says. Number 1, a complete copy of each of the inspection reports, and that's why it identifies earlier what the inspection reports are, together with a property inspection contingency removal addendum. Here's the optimal word, or. Now, how many people have sent a release and they go, well, you got to give us the inspection? No, I don't. Or a purchase agreement release and or a purchase agreement termination. Right? What's a termination deal with? Contract. What's the release agreement deal with? The earnest money deposit. Okay? That's your difference. A release is bilateral. Both parties have to sign and agree to what's going to happen with that money. A termination is unilateral, meaning you're telling the other side that you're done. It's over, and when you sign that termination and send it, they don't have to sign it. It's done. It's over. End. Period. You can do both. Send over a termination to kill the contract and send over a release agreement to decide what happens with the EMD. Okay? But you do not, if you choose 2 or 3, you do not have to give them a copy of a single report. You don't have to give them anything. You have to give them nothing. So I've had this one. You have to do your home inspection. Okay. we're doing a home inspection today at 3. You go over there and you unlock the lockbox and you stay there for 5 minutes and you leave. Did you do your home inspection? Sure did. But we're sending you a release. Well, you need to send me the home inspection. No, I don't. You send them a release and termination, or you send them all the inspection reports in a Picra. That's it. Only time you have to send them all the inspection report is when you're asking for repairs. Something to keep in mind. People try to get fancy on you. Should, this is really important right here, okay? Should no removal addendum and complete copy of appropriate inspection reports or no release or termination agreement be delivered to seller by deadline, the contingency described in paragraph 1 shall be deemed satisfied and considered removed, and the agreement shall remain in full force and effect. If you miss your deadline, you no longer have that contingency. You no longer have that out, and you no longer have the right to ask for anything to be repaired. Because if you quit after that, you're in breach. Okay? Don't miss that deadline. Now, there's another deadline we're going to talk about here when we get up to this negotiation period, and people get these confused, so I don't want you to. This only applies if a Picra, a termination or release were not delivered by the deadline. So the trap people fall in is this. Well, I'm releasing, so I don't have to worry about it because I'll just get them a release or termination whenever. No. You have to have that release or that termination to them prior to the deadline. Prior to the deadline, okay? If you want to walk away. Because if you do it after the deadline, you can't walk away. So keep that in mind. Now, once you deliver it, let's say you have a 7-day contingency period, and let's say that ends next Wednesday, and I give them the Picra tomorrow. That 7 days is over. Forget about it. It doesn't matter if it's till next Wednesday or not. It's done. You just started a new deadline. And you started the new deadline you started is your 5-day negotiation period. So that's what we're going to talk about next. The parties shall have 5 days after buyer's delivery of the proposed removal addendum, negotiation period, to negotiate and agree upon such removal addendum at any time during the negotiation period. Anytime. Buyer or seller may extend or alter offers and counteroffers as desired to finalize the removal addendum. If buyer and seller agree upon term, parties shall execute the removal addendum. Now, extend. I'm going to talk about that just for a second. We talked about extending the Pica. You can also extend the Picra 5-day negotiation period. But you have to do it before the 5 days is up. So if you're 3 days into it and you guys are not coming to terms, I say, hey, look, we need to do some more investigation about the repairs that you're wanting to get done. So what we would like to do is extend this by another 4 or 5 days so we can go ahead and get some more contractors out here to give us other estimates on the property. That's a great reason to extend that 5-day negotiation period, because you may not be able to get an HVA system. You may not be able to get Virginia foundations out there in the time frame you need to, right? More so the seller, okay? More so the seller, because if you submit Virginia foundations for $40,000 in repairing the crawl space, he's probably want to get a second opinion, and I would not blame him if he did, right? And he goes to JES, and then they come in at $60,000, then he comes back to $40, because that's just kind of how that rolls. Make sense? Right? And I know this because Virginia Foundation System, in my opinion, does a much better job than JES, but that's neither here nor there. I think April Mesker would agree with me. Would you agree with that, April? April can't hear me. All right. So that takes care of this, step 1. Or 2, if the parties, and this is where it gets real tricky. If the parties have not, and this is where it gets real tricky. If the parties have not executed an acceptable removal addendum prior to the expiration of the negotiation period, the 5 days, buyer shall have the option to terminate the agreement by delivering a termination notice to seller within 1 day following the expiration of the negotiation period, the additional day. After expiration of the additional day, if buyer has not accepted the terms agreed to upon date, remove the contingency, or terminated the agreement, either buyer or seller may terminate the agreement. All right, so let's talk about that real quick, because that's a lot of blah, right? Basically, it's really simple. You have 5 days to come to an agreement, including no response. Okay? Keep that in mind. So you submit your Picra, and the listing agent ghosts you. Can't get a hold of them, right? Before the end of the 5 days, you need to make a decision. Accept the property as is, or walk away by submitting a termination. That's it, right? That's your only 2 options in this period when you can extend it. But even if you can't come to an agreement, you either got to extend it, and if there's no communication, you got to do that. Because if you don't do that, then it goes into the additional day. And at the additional day, the buyer delivers to the seller within 1 day following expiration period of the negotiation period, the additional day. That additional day, buyer can walk. But after that initial day, after expiration of the additional day, if buyer has not accepted the terms agreed to upon date, remove the contingency or terminate the agreement, either buyer or seller may terminate the agreement. Can somebody explain to me the major issue if we go this route? Let's say we get past the initial day, the last day, and let's say we've not done anything with it. We haven't done a removal addendum, we haven't signed a termination, we haven't done a release, and we're 3 days from closing and nobody's ever done anything with it. And the buyer and the seller are like, well, to hell with it. Buyer's like, well, I'm just going to buy the property, then screw it. You can never get a hold of him. What can happen at closing? Seller can walk away all the way up to closing because you never closed that loop on that contingency. And it says right there, after expiration of the additional day, and it doesn't put a time frame on it, just any time after that date, the buyer or seller may terminate the agreement, which also means the buyer can walk away at any point. Why would a seller want to walk away the day of closing? Anybody know?
You got a better offer?
Got a better offer. Got a better offer. So what I'm trying to explain to you guys is close the loop. Close the loop. If you have a contingency, if it's not a self-closing contingency, anybody can name a self-closing contingency? Anybody name one?
Oh, like a home, they have like a,
Respond within 5 days.
like.
HOA.
Have a house for sale.
HOA is a self-closing contingency. If they haven't done anything within 3 days, then they've agreed to it. Right? That's one of those things that in order to enact it, you have to do something like with an HOA. I give them the paperwork, they sign for the paperwork. They've got 3 days to review it. Yeah, well, I'm just saying, just in general. No, you're right. But just in general, that's, so this is not, I think it should be a self-canceling contingency. When we go up here, go back up. This is a self-canceling contingency right here in the contract. So you are absolutely right, Karen. If they don't deliver this, then it's done. Well, it should be the same thing down here. But
So let's say the seller does ghost you, or the listing agent.
yeah,
Doesn't respond, doesn't
Ghost.
respond, doesn't
Yep.
respond. The only way for you to close it is to,
termination, unilateral.
or,
But if you wanna buy it
but
without
if
the
you wanna
repair?
buy it, then you're going to then.
Submit a Picra that says no repairs required.
Is that, and that one's gonna basically.
All you have to do is deliver it.
The previous one?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Sent them a Picra.
No, absolutely.
And
You're,
they
it's a
have
counter.
ghosted you.
Yeah, so it's okay. So you send a Picra, right? That says, and now just follow me on this. You send a Picra that says all these repairs required. They ghost you. Prior to the end of that 5 days, you send one that says no repairs required, and you copy the broker. Because whose client is it? Whose client is it? It's the broker's.
Yeah.
Copy the broker. You're
So
done.
let's
Seller
say,
doesn't have
but
to
let's
sign
say the
that
5 days.
Nope.
Let's say the 5 days goes by. 6 day goes by, nobody does anything. We're at day 15.
Okay.
Nothing.
Okay.
What do you, and your buyer says, I'm just gonna buy it anyways. What are you gonna do then?
I'm going to submit a Picra that says no repairs required.
Okay, and
No one has to sign it. The
No.
seller doesn't have to sign it.
No.
buyer,
Well, yeah.
The buyer signs it, and that's it. Done. Yes, correct.
So submit Picra number 1 within your required time frame for delivery.
Yep.
So no response. Everyone's ghosted. Day 15.
Yep.
You submit another Picra.
Yep.
Then even though it's outside and there's been no.
Doesn't matter. You're closing the loop. It's going to be an argument, but you're closing the loop. You're basically saying, hey, I'm closing this loop because I'm accepting the house the way it is.
Sorry, it's a lot of talking. I just need to
Oh. I'm like, I'll give you the microphone. Get on up here. I thought, man, we're going for a fight now. No. Yeah, you just got to close the loop.
It's going to kick your ass.
Close the loop.
Just say, I think you're wrong, and I
I have to think about this.
You look, the key on any contingency, I don't care when it is, you got to close it. Got to close it.
just don't understand how you get away with the seller not saying, okay.
Because you have-
On day 15, signing a new Picra, like, they
Because
don't
the
sign.
seller,
I mean, I guess
seller has a better offer in hand. They're hoping you're just
No,
gonna
but I
say,
understand why they don't want to, but how do you close it?
Because you're not making the seller do anything. I see what you're saying.
I
see
get-
what you're saying in that, well, the seller has to agree not to do anything. No, I get that. But I think you're going to win all day long because you're saying you're going to accept the house the way it is. Because,
I guess it would look like the seller accepted your contract in bad faith if they don't go along with you saying you're gonna accept it as is. Right?
if buyer has not accepted the terms agreed upon to date,
Okay.
which you change those agreed upon terms by going,
So if you say, okay, fine, we'll take the house as is, it's day 15, we just wanna close.
well, first of all, you should never do that.
Yes.
See, that's where things are going to get tricky, right? So you missed a deadline, but you're trying to close a contingency. Could they make an argument? Sure. They absolutely could make an argument that, hey, you submitted it after the time frame, it's irrelevant, I can walk anytime I want to. They could make that argument, okay? That's why you need to hit your deadlines. But I would certainly make an argument the other day that we're just closing the loop that didn't get closed.
we're assuming that they
They
met
did
the
hit their
deadline.
deadlines.
Which one? The negotiation period deadline or the first one?
Well, you gave them
The
the
first one.
Picra, and then the seller never said anything,
So the
ghosted
seller-
them.
There's-
So day 13, we're giving them a.
Okay, hold on. This, soon as you deliver the Picra, you start the 5-day so now we're into the second category. This is gone. Now we're into this. Okay.
So because you said hit your deadline, so we did hit our deadline.
On that one, then you have a new deadline.
Yeah, and the seller misses their deadline because they got a new contract.
So you don't miss yours.
So then, on the 6th day, you say, hey, we changed.
We accept.
Got you.
That's what that additional day's for. We accept. Yeah, we accept. We'll take the contract just like it is. That's why they give you that additional day. That make sense?
That makes sense.
That doesn't make sense.
That's why I'm saying don't get outside your deadline.
So you're saying don't wait to day 15. On day 6 is when you make that decision.
1,000%.
Okay.
And personally, I would make it on day 5.
That
Maybe
closed
screwed.
my loop right there.
Okay, good.
No.
I mean, yes, but you, all right, so let's talk through this, okay.
All right, I love it. Let's go.
So yes, at that point, the buyer would be like,
Accepting the house as is.
Like, oh, we haven't heard from the seller yet. Well, screw it. I'll just do the repairs myself. I still want to buy.
I've asked you for 7 repairs. You know what? Now I'm not asking you for any.
so you're saying that on that day, you're forcing your buyer to make a decision one way or the other?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
On day 6.
On day 6, absolutely.
You would say, Joe Schmo, we either.
Contract says a buyer has to make a decision on day 6, or the seller can then walk away.
Unless the seller's giving you something saying we need more time,
Correct.
Yeah.
then that you give them more time.
Yeah. The no response thing happens, but it's very rare. Very rare. And usually, guys, listen to me very carefully. If you're day 4 and you still have, and they've ghosted you, right, after you submitted a Picra, get me or Craig on the phone because we will pick up the phone and call their broker and go, hey, your buyer's agent or your seller's agent, your listing agent is in a little bit of breach here because of X. Right? So we need to get this, we need communication, right? And then he'll get involved.
They're not necessarily.
Yeah, they are in breach, aren't they?
Not until
Or
they.
they're-
No, not yet.
They're flirting with being in breach.
No, they're not.
You just said they were in breach though.
No, well, you're right. I didn't mean to say that. They're not in breach.
But
They're not in breach.
You would just.
Because the contract allows them not to negotiate anything and wait till the 7th day and walk their own the damn time. Fucking contract allows for that. I hate that it does, but it does.
So more likely they have something, a better offer in hand and they're hoping to terminate on day.
Or they've got a really horrible listing agent that's got a full-time job that just isn't paying attention.
So why can't they just be honest? Like, hey, we got a better offer. Either you get rid of your Picra, or we accept the other offer and don't do anything.
Well, why would a seller do that if he's hoping to get that better offer?
Why wouldn't he just make a line through all repairs because he's got a better offer and say we're not doing anything?
Well, that's exactly what I would do.
That's what I'm like.
That's exactly what I would do, but we're not talking about normal people. We're talking about
Sucky
Bad agents.
such a low bar to get a real estate license, right? So there you go. All right, requested repairs. Any questions on this?
I think we did that to death.
We did. All right, should buyer choose to deliver a removal addendum, must list and removal addendum all items identified in the inspection report which buyer requests seller to repair. Any items identified in any of the inspection reports which are not included in the final agreed upon removal addendum, including without limitation walkthrough items under paragraph 13D of the agreement, which are identified in any of the inspection reports, shall be deemed waived by the buyer, except for those items identified in paragraph 12, property condition, blah, 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 blah. Let me tell you what this says. In the walkthrough, it says you check the HVAC. On the home inspection, there was a problem with the HVAC, and you put it in the Picra and said, fix the HVAC, and the seller goes, no. And you said, okay. You said, okay. You cannot go back on the walkthrough and go, sorry, HVAC is a walkthrough item, you have to fix it. No, it becomes a waived item. The walkthrough, and I want everybody to think about the walkthrough like this. Really simple. Everything that was working during the home inspection should be working at walkthrough. If it didn't work during the home inspection, then you don't get to ask for it at walkthrough. It's that simple. Right? Because you accepted the house in its condition in your inspection. Now, where that gets into a little bit of a gray area is they moved the refrigerator and the linoleum's ripped up, or the carpet's, or something along those lines, right? And then the argument becomes, well, it was that way before, no, it was hidden, blah, blah, blah. And we deal with that sometimes, but we're talking about normal, not abnormal things, and that's an abnormal thing to happen. So, what's not ever waived, right? Never waived, even if you put it on your Picra and they say no, is the other things that are further, except for those items agreed in paragraph 12 of the agreement. Any items identified on any respective report shall also be deemed waived if the no property inspection condition, removal, or release agreement is delivered by the deadline. I talk really fast. Okay, so you don't do a home inspection.
Can't ask for it.
Can't ask for shit on the walkthrough. If you don't do a home inspection, you can't use the Picra as your home inspection. It says it right there. Now, any requested repair items listed on the property inspection contingency removal addendum that seller and buyer agree not to repair are waived by buyer. If required, subject to the cap, seller remains obligated to repair any waived items under subparagraph 13A, appraisal and required repairs, 13B, wood destroying insect moisture inspection reports, right? Well and septic of the agreement. Additionally, in the event of the deadline expires without the submission of a removal addendum, buyer shall deliver upon seller's request complete copies of the inspections reports retained by buyer. There's a couple of things in this paragraph. Number one, if you ask for rotted wood to be repaired and the seller says no and you agree, that becomes a waived item until the appraiser goes, no, it has to be done. And it's no longer a waived item. It now is covered under the cap. Okay? That's number one. Number two, if you miss all those deadlines, you have to give the reports to the seller, whether you want to or not. Additionally, in the event the deadline expires without submission of a removal addendum, buyer shall deliver, upon seller's request, complete copies of each of the inspection reports obtained by buyer. So if you just decide not to respond or you miss your deadline, that sentence, that paragraph right there gives the seller full access to your buyer's home inspection that they paid for. You cannot say no. What's that? Yeah, well, the only way you can keep that report private is to do what? Termination or release within the deadlines. That's it. Guys, I'm telling you, this is the most complicated document we have in our contracts.
It's more complicated than the purchase agreement.
It really is. All right, release agreement. Pretty simple. In the event the release agreement is delivered under the provision of paragraph 2, or buyer or seller terminates the agreement pursuant to paragraph 2, all parties shall execute the release agreement, whereupon the escrow agent shall release the deposit to buyer, and except as provided in paragraph 5 below, no party shall have any further rights or obligations under the agreement. This is what gives the broker clear and concise directions and can release the EMD whether a release was signed or not. As long as the broker can prove that everything was done within those time frames, he'll be okay. Make sense? What does a broker do with an EMD when the broker can't determine and the parties can't come to an agreement? We interplead them to the court system. We turn them over to the city of Virginia Beach and go fight for it in the courts. Called interpleading funds. All right. Time is of the essence for all parties in this addendum. We all know what that means. You miss a deadline. Whoop. All right, next. Let's go back to 5. Damage indemnification. Buyer and seller jointly and severally agree to indemnify, defend, and hold both listing firm and selling firm harmless from and against any and all claims, demands, actions, or proceedings, including the recovery of attorney's fees, resulting from any dispute relating to A, the items identified, omitted, or allegedly omitted by inspectors in the inspection report that keeps you safe. How many times you heard that home inspector missed it? You're held harmless from that. B, repairs made to the property. Right? You're not responsible for that. Buyer agrees to indemnify, defend, and hold seller, listing firm, and selling firm harmless from and against any and all claims, actions, demands, or proceedings, including the recovery of attorney's fees, resulting from any injury to persons or damages to property arising from inspection of the property under paragraph 1 of the rights of access to the property granted to the buyer under the addendum. Which that means if you go there and you're doing your inspection and you fall on your face and break your face, you can't sue the seller. Okay, as the buyer's agent, all right, or the buyer. And then if any damage to the property, and this is important, if any damage to the property is caused by any of the inspections described, paragraph 1 above, buyer shall be responsible for the cost of repairs of such damages. Let me give you a prime example. Home inspector goes and inspects the home. It's winter, and they leave the heat off. Pipes freeze and bust, flood the house. Who's responsible for that? Home inspector or the buyer's aid or the buyer? The buyer is. The buyer is responsible for it. If any damage to the property is caused by any of the inspections described in paragraph 1 above, buyer shall be responsible for the cost of repair of such damages. So you can't look at the seller and go, sorry, my home inspector did it, sue the home inspector. No. The buyer is responsible, and then the buyer can go after the home inspector, but that's how that works. So if anybody you hire and bring on the property, you're responsible for that. Questions?
So if the home inspector goes over and turns the oven on and breaks the whole handle off, the buyer's responsible?
1,000%. I take it that has happened to you. That's very specific. Chrissy, that's very specific. If the homeowner twisted up, has that happened to you?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of something.
Yeah, if any damage to the property is done that. Does that make sense?
Okay, so but how can you prove that it wasn't already broken before?
Well, that's for the attorneys to figure out.
Oh, okay.
That's like with anything, right? You can't decide whether you're guilty or innocent on your own. A third party has to do that. And that's usually the court system. So the question from Abby was how do you decide whether it was broke or not? Well, that's beforehand. Well, that's the argument, right? So I can't let the seller determine that. He's an interested party. I can't let the buyer determine that because they're an interested party. So it has to be a third party to do that. I'm being sued right now for something I shouldn't be sued for. And I told the attorney, I told the attorney, I was like, well, I didn't do it. He goes, I understand and I hear you, but that's not your decision to make. I went, yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, I guess if that was the case, everybody that gets arrested, if they could determine their own guilt or innocence, nobody'd be in jail. Right? So I'm like, okay, fair enough. So, all right, let's jump to the Picra real quick. We're going to start with the very first one. Very first one's easy. No repairs are necessary. Check it, move on. Woo! That's what we like to see. Yeah, good to go. Let's move to clothing. B is where it gets a little more complicated, right? It says seller agrees to make all repairs listed below at seller's expense. The total cost requested of repair items agreed to be repaired by seller shall not be included in the cap referenced in paragraph 13. I don't care what this costs, they're separate issues, and everybody already knows that. Unless otherwise agreed to in writing. In the performance of an EFIS repair, seller is to use a qualified professional with experience in this field. All repairs to be completed in a workmanlike manner prior to walkthrough, and evidence of payment, if applicable for such work, shall be provided to buyer prior to walkthrough. Guys, I'm going to say this again. Well, let's just get through this real quick. Buyer, at buyer's expense, reserves the right to have the original inspector or firm inspect such work upon completion. Such inspection may occur at or prior to the walkthrough. Seller remains obligated to perform all obligations under paragraph 12 of the agreement. Furthermore, subject to the cap, seller remains obligated to repair any waived items that fall under paragraph 13A, appraisal, wood destroying, and well and septic of the agreement. All right. You guys have heard time and time again, and I've said this time and time again, buyer does the inspections. Well, I'm going to take that one step further and say this. When you have a problem with the HVAC, and you have your HVAC person come out and inspect the HVAC, and he says it's going to take $2,000 to fix this, get an estimate from that person and submit that as your Picra request. And I would say something to the effect, seller to pay the following attached invoices prior to closing to have work completed by referenced company. Now, most of your sellers are going to push back on that. And here's why they're going to push back. Oh, I think I can get it done cheaper. I can get it done by, my third brother's cousin's aunt's twice uncle, third time removed. I can get him to do that. That's fine. Let him go get an estimate and tell the listing agent, hey, that's fine. If he wants to get another estimate, that's fine. I would like to see that estimate. If he would, just submit that to us so we can get a look at that estimate. Then you get the estimate, and your estimate's for $2,000, and theirs is for $1,700, right? Would you rather have your buyer pay $300 and use your guy, or have it done by somebody you've never heard of and that you can't go back to? You have to understand something. If the seller hires an HVAC company to come in and do a repair, he's probably going to be what's called a curbside warranty. Anybody know what a curbside warranty is? The second he pulls away from the curb, the warranty's over. All right? But if you hired them, especially because it's somebody you know, like, and trust, it's somebody you do business with every day, and it has a problem with something, it's probably going to come back and fix it. So my opinion is, first, try to get the seller to use your contractor and explain to the listing agent, hey, listen, try to take some liability off your seller. If we use my contractor that my buyer has hired, obviously I can never come back to you if there's a problem down the road. So that's number one, indemnification. If the seller is like, well, it's $300, I can get it done $300 cheaper, go, okay, no problem. We're going to use my guy. You pay the $1,700 like you would with your guy. We'll pay the difference, right? It is better to have your person who you know, like, and trust and have a relationship with do the work than it is to have somebody the seller has a relationship that does the work that you don't have contact or you don't have even communication with, okay? I can't stress that. I can't tell you the number of times that sellers, before I started doing this, the seller would call me, or the buyer, my buyer would call me and go, "Hey, Kenny, who was it that worked on the HVAC?" I'm like, "I don't know, man. Hold on, let me look it up." And then you try to track them down. They're like, "Who are you?" "Oh, we bought the house." "Oh, well, we can't deal with you. We were hired by somebody else." And that runs into all this problems, right? Hire your own people to do the work. Number one, hire your own people to investigate. Hire your own people to do the work. Now, you might just run into a seller that's just absolutely obstinate about, "No, we're using my people." Fine. Just try to vet the company that they're using, okay? If it's somebody you've never heard of, somebody that doesn't, it's like, "Well, who's doing the work?" "Well, John Smith." "What company he works with?" "Well, he's just licensed, doesn't really have a company." Red flag, okay? Because if he doesn't really have a company, who can you go back to for warranty work and all that other stuff? So just be very careful about that. It's super, super important. All right, Rob, at the top, did you say never, or you don't have to give the seller the inspection report if you terminate the release of contract within time frame? Is there a reason not to give the inspection report afterwards? I'm thinking I might have to work with that agent again. So first of all, the inspection doesn't belong to you, belongs to the buyer, and they paid for it. So if you did want to give it to them, you have to get permission from the buyer to give out that inspection report to anybody. You can't just arbitrarily do that. You have to have written permission from your seller to do that. And what I've done in the past when I've had an obstinate seller is go, "Okay, fine, you want it? The inspection was $450, reimburse the buyer, and he'll give you the inspection report," right? He had to pay for it. He's not using it. You have to pay for it. So that's, Rob, I hope that answers that question. You don't have to provide. Yeah. April, I think, answers. You do not have to provide the inspection report to the seller if you do not request repairs or release or termination. Correct. Is the buyer's decision to give it? Correct. They paid for it. Correct. See, April's a broker. She knows all this stuff. As a listing agent, I don't want to see the report, nor want my seller to read it. Okay, so April's not wrong. If you get an inspection report and there are some latent defects that are identified in that report, you are now obligated to report those to anybody that's going to buy the house. So she makes a valid point there. So, questions? We can do a whole class on how to write these things, but if you have an invoice and just say, "Pay attached invoice, have work done prior to closing," easy day, right? It's going to be some things that's not going to work for, right? Some really minor stuff, but yes.
Can you request for the contractor to be warranted if we're going to do when you put that in
The question was, can you request that the work be done by someone who provides a warranty? Sure. You sure can. I don't think I've ever seen that done, but you sure can. The thing is that's my point. If you have it done by your contractor, you've got a relationship with, what the warranty is. Like if I use Jay from Air Care Solutions or I use Steve Buddy to do a repair for me, I know for a fact in the next 6 months I can call him up and go, "Hey, there's a problem here." He'll come out and look at it. If it's something he did wrong, he'll fix it. That's that relationship. I know I can trust both of those guys, and I know they'll do what needs to be done for my buyer because they do a lot of work for me. They do a lot of work for my buyers, and they want that repeat business. Some guy doing a one-off doesn't care. Okay? Doesn't care. So just, something to keep in mind. You can take that down. We're done. Questions on, yes, Craig.
Hey, when you're writing items on the Picra, or if you're the listing agent, get them items on the Picra, get clarification and write down the repairs you request on the Picra should be written well enough that you can take that Picra and that home inspection report, send it to 911, and they should be able to give you an estimate right from that. They shouldn't have to ask any questions.
That's a great point. That is a great point. So to this thing, this company right here, if you send them the Picra and the home inspection report, 24, 48 hours,
Pretty darn quick. I don't think I've had to take 48 hours.
they'll turn it around usually without even going to the property and give you a complete repair list of everything that's on there. And then all you have to do is submit one thing that says, seller to pay this and have these following items fixed. They'll even a la carte it for you what each repair cost. So if the seller says, "Well, I'm doing this, but I'm not doing this," then you still have the number and they still pay it.
But if it's a crappily written Picra or a crappy home inspection, they can't tell.
Right. And this is a way, and so even Rod at 911 is like trips out the way I do this, right? He's okay with it, but he's used to getting this from who? The seller. And now we're giving it to him from the buyer so that we can submit it, and he loves that, right? He loves that because he's getting it from both ends now. But I'm telling you, that's the way to go right there. They do a good job.
April said they're fantastic and not overpriced.
What's that?
April said they're fantastic and not overpriced.
No, not at all.
There you go. They are fantastic and not overpriced. That is a good call. I want to make one other. That's all I have. Any other questions? So as you all know, Robin over here has been integrated into our family, and starting here towards the end of the month, we're happy to say Robin's going full-time with the company. So yay. So she has just been absolutely killing. I'm going to take a minute to brag on her. She has been doing a lot of the Canva stuff, and she has really taken a lot of pressure off of Abby. And everybody knows Abby is a half of my brain running around here. And so Robin is doing a really good job. So I just want to let you know in front of everybody, Robin, I think you're doing an outstanding job, and I'm really, really glad you're here. All right, guys. We have no other questions? Go sell a house. Damn spider!